Welcome to the Perpetual Growth Podcast with Zach Palmer, the show where we explore the strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to grow your business, strengthen your relationships, and elevate your health. Because growth isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. Now, today, I'm thrilled to welcome Rodney Steele. Rodney is the CEO of Dinsmore Steele, the nation's largest professional employer brokerage, which over the last 16 years has saved over 3,000 companies a total of $592 million, an average of right around $2,016 per employee each year. With an easy-to-use, unbiased platform for comparing top PEOs all in one place, Dinsmore Steele is able to save businesses over a month of research time. Their service is free and their experience is unmatched as they help companies to quickly find the right fit without the hassle. So let's dive in and take another step on your journey to perpetual growth. So welcome. It's great to have you here today, Rodney.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Well, as my audience and listeners know, I like to lead with a very similar question. If you would, we would love to just explore a little bit about your background, your history. Talk to us about where you started in business, how it brought you to where you are today. What were some of the critical milestones, the turning points, the challenges, the sleepless nights that led you to create the business that you now have and the impact that you're now able to make?
Sure. Yeah. So I started out in business. It's probably like 12 or 13. Oddly enough, I remember my mom was like, I wanted to get a bike or something, and maybe it was a watch, I think. And she was like, you're gonna have to figure out how to get the money. She gave me like half of it. I had to figure it out. It was like $50, which obviously was $1 million then. So I was cleaning windows and cutting grass and raking and that stuff. But in all seriousness, I started out in finance. After college, I went into work in finance, and that obviously abruptly came to an end in 2008. And I got involved in PEO, and I did that for about 2 years, working for two PEOs. And then in 2010, I just said, you know what, I'm going to start my own thing. And it's been quite a journey. But my point is, back from earlier, was that I think I've always been an entrepreneur. I think everybody, to a certain extent, has a little bit of it in them. I think everyone has a gift, right? And some people have a couple, right? But I think everyone has a gift. And I think oftentimes if you're able to figure out how to get someone to pay you to use that gift for them, right? And then you have a built-in business.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, the entrepreneurial drive runs deep, right? Like almost
Sure.
every entrepreneur I meet has some kind of story history that starts at a relatively young age, painting houses, cutting the grass, delivering the newspapers, whatever, because there was something they wanted or desired. And I think that work ethic, the knowing that you have the ability to make an impact and create, a life by your own design is something that unfortunately does not come natural to most people. And, whether that's fear, upbringing, conditioning from the environment, the town you grew up, whatever the thing is, it doesn't really matter. But I love what you said, because it's a really important thing that I hope everybody grasps if we have any listeners that, really haven't explored their passions yet, that everybody does have a gift. It's our job to really figure out what that gift is. Now,
Right.
what I'm curious about is, you talk about, you mentioned briefly, you wanted to purchase a bike, and your mom said, hey, you're going to pay for this. And I love that, because I leverage a lot of those same values with my kids. I'm trying to start early. And what I'm, aside from her, I don't know if you would look at it as forcing you or inviting you to rise up to that challenge.
Sure.
Who were your mentors early on? What were some of those lessons that you learned from that experience that you took into your early business career? Was it your mom? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so my mom was pretty active in the community and whatnot. She was active. I'm an only child, so she was very active in my rearing, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And she had her own business, and I spent a lot of time. She owned a hair salon, and I spent a lot of time in the salon with her, and I saw how it worked, and it was a lot of interpersonal stuff, and I just saw that, like, business is so many different parts, like there's so many moving parts, right? I think people don't realize. And I would say she was an early mentor. She always taught me like the basics, like you have to make more money than you spend. You know, if you have a good product and you offer a fair price, people will, use your product or service.
Mhm.
I think the main thing that she taught me that's always stuck with me is that if you can solve a problem, right, for people, then you have a business. And I think that goes back to, again, translates what you were saying earlier about gift, right? If you have a gift, then and you can solve a problem for people, and most people, we no, we never run out of problems, right? If you can solve a problem for people, then you have a business, right? You have an
Yeah.
offering. You have, I think it's Sam Ovens or somebody, right, said a long time ago, you know, the key to success is taking people from where they are to where they want to be, right? And that time frame, or whatever it is what people will pay you for.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You took me back to my childhood. I actually forgotten about some of these things. I mean, my dad was really successful in the travel industry,
Mm,
share owner, vice president, general manager, and he followed his passion for a very long time. My mom pursued hers and opened a business in the health and wellness industry, and I forgot about it, but I remember going in and like gyms were kind of like my playground when I was a kid. They sold
yeah.
fitness equipment, supplements, and I remember sitting in the office and my mom's like balancing the ledgers. And back then,
Hmm.
I mean, you're talking like the paper ledgers and the printer had the little, nubbed spool where you had to tear the
Yeah.
sides off and stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
and even the little insights. I remember watching my dad balance his checkbook, and up until probably a year ago, I was still balancing my checkbook just because I didn't trust the banks that much. Now I've got a bit more,
Hmm. I don't
balance
know if
and
you
life
should
approach.
either.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
it's
joking.
probably true.
I'm joking.
It's always wise to have a little redundancy there.
That's right.
But that's so true. Like, the environment that you grow up in can have such a dramatic impact on where you
Hmm.
go next.
Sure.
Um, so that's really what a cool blessing to have your mom have guided you along that way. And that lesson she taught you is so valuable. I don't think I've met anybody whose parent shared that with them yet. The importance of being able to solve a problem and
Hmm.
provide a high level quality of service. It's one thing to be able to solve the problem. It's a whole nother thing to be able to do it in a way that creates genuine relationships, repeat business, and
Hmm.
really provides the end result that they desire in a way that keeps them coming back for more. Um,
Sure.
you know, so you went into the financial world for a short time. 2008, I know that was a extremely difficult time for me as I just moved and expanded the business. I was like 21
Yeah.
years old, 2 years in business, no idea what I was doing. Um, do you look at that time in life like, tell me a little bit more about what that was like to go through that transition? Because I know
Sure.
fighting through it was scary. Making the decision to pivot and go a completely different direction, what was that like for you? What were some of the internal
Sure.
conversations, the demons, the stuff that you had to fight through?
Yeah. So like one of the interesting things, right, I'll say is when I worked in finance, I used to do a variation of where we used to buy and sell mortgages, right? But not on a broker level, right? More on like a Wall Street level, if you will.
Mhm.
And I think what happened is that very early on, I had a immense success doing that. And when I say success, right, everyone thinks they're successful if they make money. Um, and I made an immense amount of money for a young age, right? And I just thought that's how it was, right? I was like, I'm smarter than everybody else. I obviously, you start believing things that are not the case. And when it crashed, it was very, very quickly became evident to me that like I was instead of like I thought I was so smart. It wasn't that I was smart. I was fortunate.
Mhm.
And um, it was difficult. It was very difficult. So essentially, what happened is that I lost my job, and how I got into this business that I do now is one of my friends called me up and said, "My brother's raising money for a company. Can you help him?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went over to help them, and one of the conditions of them getting funded was they had to join a PEO, which is obviously what I do now, but or variation of. And it was very interesting to me because I was like, well, I don't have anything else to do, so maybe I'll solve the problem. And it's fine, So long story short, I had to figure out which PO made the most sense. I realized this is a real pain in the ass, and I said I'm going to solve this, right? So I'm going to figure out how to fix it, and that's essentially what we did. But to answer your question, I think a lot of times, right, it comes down to um, maybe not necessarily because, like, even when I started my company, right, we pivoted. Like when we first started, we only worked with brokers now. And then I said, well, this doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense. And I said, well, maybe I'll open this to the public, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that even if you can solve a problem, you might not in the end be solving the same problem you started out solving, right?
That's uh, an incredibly important tidbit of wisdom. I think so often we can, and I've witnessed this countless times. I mean, people move into the business world, they have a desire to create a product or service, to solve people's
Hmm.
problems, to contribute, to give back, to, earn more revenue for themselves. And the challenge is the vision that we have, because
Hmm.
you can get so focused on the thing that you want to create that you can lose insights in terms of what the industry is telling you at present, what's happening economically, environmentally, be it in the United States or global. All of
Hmm.
these things have an impact on what direction your business can and should be moving. And if we're too focused on the result, the outcome that we want to create, and we're not receptive to what everything else is telling us, we lose that ability to pivot. It's like one of my mentors said to me one time, I love this expression: be resolute in your outcomes, but flexible in
Hmm.
your approach. And
That's
I
great.
think that speaks really well to that
Yeah.
balance of, you've got to have that wherewithal to be able to fight through the challenges, but also listen to your clients, the things that are
Hmm.
going on globally, economically, and be willing to make those adaptations, because otherwise you're sprinting into a headwind. Um,
Yeah.
for you, I'm really curious about that. Like, you mentioned it, you worked with two independent PEOs initially, and then you said,
Yeah.
enough's enough. It's time to do this on my own. What led to that breakthrough? And I know this is
Mhm.
never a disparity amongst the individuals you work with. It's always about the lessons that you took away from it and what drove you to make that decision. So what was that turning point for you? I mean, or maybe it was a series of events.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So initially what happened was is that I was sitting down and I normally do. I always kind of do things backwards. So like I'll figure out when I was a kid, I figured out like how much money do I want to make? And then I thought, well, all right, well then then I would back out like how many hours I have to work, what do I have to do, things. So I was running numbers on why I wasn't closing more business because I was in sales at these POs. And I realized, right, that it was because I only had one solution. Right. And it's like, what's that saying? If you're selling hammers, everything looks like a nail. Is that something like that, right?
Right.
So I said to myself, I was like, who am I losing business to, right? And I realized that, and nothing against the POs I worked at, right? They were great. They
Mhm.
are great. But I said to myself, right, I only have one solution. I only have one health insurance carrier. I only have one, system, payroll system, whatever it is. And I said, what if I took all of the PEOs, because there's hundreds of them. I said, and I put them on a platform very similar to Kayak or, I mean, really any of those, Expedia, whatever it is, right? And I put them all on a platform and I made it simple, right? Would this make sense? And essentially what I did is I married the two. So I said, I'm going to take a platform that makes it very simple to do, right? To compare them all. And I'm going to make it so that it's very simple to get quotes from them. And when
Mhm.
I married the two together, that's what brought the solution together, is that basically we can do what would take a normal person a month in 5 to 7 business days. Right.
That's amazing. I mean, that's brilliant.
Thank
What
you.
I love about that is, and again, this speaks to, this is a lesson for every single business owner. It's like, a problem is only a problem if you stay there. Like, if you
Right.
continue to look at it
That's
that way,
right.
it's like every problem is an opportunity, every challenge is a gift. And you saw one of the biggest challenges, as I'm hearing it, as we're trying to put people into this tiny little box. We've got
Hmm.
one product or service to help overcome each of these potentialities or challenges in their business, which doesn't really align with creating customizable solutions that meet the individual where they're at, that truly meet their needs. So you
Right.
said, let me take a step back. Let's put all of these things on one platform and provide people with more choices and better solutions. Am I getting that right?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. That's that's brilliant. And
Thank you.
again, I love hearing stories like this too, because I think, one of the things that I feel very strongly about, and I say this because I made these same stupid mistakes more than one time, is, as a business owner, we all, I think, have this tendency to get myopic. Like, we're so
Hmm.
focused on looking down the scope of the rifle that we're missing the entire playing field. And being able to take a step back and really look at the problem for what it is and find the underlying opportunities and use it as a catalyst to be able to serve your clients at an even higher level is
Yeah.
such a beautiful gift. So what an amazing thing
Agree.
you've done. Um,
Thank you.
if you would, what I would love to explore is, just tell us a little bit more about exactly what you do for small businesses. You know, if you want to kind of chunk down small and
Sure.
medium-sized businesses, I believe your primary focus, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to kind of chunk down, what are some of those different service suites and packages, and what do they do for the client? And how does, you explained it very simply and eloquently, like how you chunk down and save them time, but
Mhm.
where can you save them time, and what are those different products? What do they look like?
Yeah. So essentially, that's a great question. So it's usually what we do. It's a pretty simple process. It starts out with a phone call, right? And we get on a
Mhm.
call and we kind of determine what you're currently doing. And then, in the past, when you would go to POs, right, there's hundreds of them. So it would, start out with a Google search and then hope you made the right choice. Essentially, what we do is we seek to understand your business, how it works, how many employees you have, what your challenges are. And from there, right, because of our expertise, we kind of know well who and what might make sense, and we can kind of draw from their profile. And then from there, we go out in your behalf and we get quotes, right? So we quote TriNet, ADP, Insperity, all of them, right? JustWorks, and then we compare all of them, and then we come back and we say, hey, listen, this is what you're currently doing, and this is what you could do with these POs, right? And it's always the most competitive quotes. So to give you an example, we'll take a company, say, that's maybe using a PO or maybe not using a PO, and we'll compare whatever it is they're doing to 40, 50, 60 POs. It really depends, right?
Mhm.
And then we come back, right? And instead of them making a decision, so instead of them working with one PO, right, and that's the only option, it doesn't really matter who they pick, right? I think what really amazes people about our service is that it's completely free, right? Our service is free, so they don't pay for it. That obviously, that obviously, a lot of times people are like, "How does this work?" Right? But that so the point being is that we're not incentivized for them to pick one solution over the other. We want them to do what's right for them, right?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
And
So go ahead. Hmm.
no, I was just and then, so that's how it works, right? That's kind
Hmm.
of a process. And then a lot of times people will say, "Well, how do you make money?" Right? Because that's probably a question.
That
Is we get
was what
paid
I
by
was
the
wondering.
providers. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we get paid by the providers if you pick a solution,
Hmm.
right? But again, right, we make the same amount regardless of the provider. So in our eyes, we in our entire business model is focused on you getting the best deal, right? And because we've all been doing this for so long, like everyone that works at my company has all worked at POs, and all of our entire sales team combined has like 75 plus years of PO experience. So we know what to look for, what to ask for, what to tell you to do, right? Things like that. I think the biggest challenge I see with what I do is that not enough people know about PO, and even less people know about me or us or my services.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I was actually thinking something along those lines as you were talking is in my first decade plus of business, I had no idea the resources that a PEO could provide.
Yeah,
I'd love to have you kind of illuminate the audience on that front, in terms of
sure.
small business is, a pretty broad definition today in terms of the number of employees, the amount of revenue
Hmm.
generated. At what stage in business does it make the most sense for an organization to start looking at utilizing your services? And what are the specific services that a PEO is going to provide to them if people are unfamiliar?
Sure. Yeah. So I always say that like a lot of companies that we work with are startups. So that
Hmm.
sometimes ranges from one employee, to those four or five. I think that the PEOs play a really good role in with startups because they give you the ability to attract and retain right off the bat, right? You have instant infrastructure. Um, but to answer your question, I would say typically it starts making sense unless you're going to grow rapidly, typically when you get to five employees, right?
Mm.
Because that's when you're going to need workers' comp, you need health insurance, you need 401k. To answer your question about what does the PO do, they do a myriad of services, but the majority, right, what most people understand is they do your payroll. So they handle all your tax filing, your compliance, all of that, your W-4s, your I-9s, all of it. They do your health insurance. They handle the administration of the plan. They answer the employees' questions. They do your enrollments. They handle your COBRA, your renewals, all of it. They can do your workers' compensation. They handle the administration. They manage the policy. They manage your claims. They handle your audits. And then they offer HR service and support. I think one common misconception I'll just touch on is that I think a lot of people think that it's going to replace an HR department. I think the best way to look at it is that companies that use the PO that are very small usually don't have an HR department, right? So, and I don't need like a robust, when you have five employees, like you need HR, but I don't necessarily know that you need a full-time HR director. You will, but I don't
Mhm.
know that you do. And then the companies that use it that are larger, they have an HR staff. So it's more of a convenience, right? But it's not meant to replace HR. And then they also will do your retirement, your 401k. Some of them, like Extensus, they do your recruiting. They have full cycle recruiting. They also arm you with an HRIS system, right? So you have a portal where they do the payroll and everything's in one place, the PTO, so forth. So they really instantly give you like it's almost like a turnkey service, right? It's kind of like a HubSpot, but for employees, right? Or like a Salesforce or some kind of software, immediately bringing everything together. And then you have the added benefit of the PEO being or eliminating 50% of your employer liability.
That's insane. I
Yeah.
actually had no idea the complete scope of services and the number of things, the number of problems that help solve. Again, I can personally relate. I mean, and I think most small business owners can because
Mhm.
I always like to put it this way, relative to stage of business, new level, new devil. Like first
That's
challenge,
right. That's great.
make your first $100,000, right? Then half
Yeah.
million, then a million, then you're trying to get to three, then to 10, then to 20, and the list goes on. But every
Yeah.
single one of those benchmarks require you to put on a new hat. You have to
Hmm.
adapt your leadership strategy, your outlook. You're going from operating in the red to and you're in running out of cash reserves to now you've hopefully got cash flow coming in, and it
Hmm.
requires a different mindset in terms of money and people management, and having one resource that can encapsulate, take care of all of those things. I mean, what a godsend. Like for the longest time was managing all of that, doing the
Hmm.
401k research, the insurance opportunities, the people management. I mean, all of it. And
Yeah. It
I didn't
never
realize
ends.
at the time I could do that. Yeah. And actually
Yeah.
what's so exciting to me about this is you guys serve a huge cross section, the biggest cross section of business owners in the United States, the small
Yeah.
businesses, which is such a gift because they're the people that need it the most. And to your point, are unaware of those resources. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to be a part of helping to get your voice, product,
Thank you.
service message out there. Yeah, because I mean, I can tell you, I know a lot of people that need it. Um,
Yeah.
I how big is your guys' team?
We only have about 12 people.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're
Yeah.
able to run at really, really high efficiency then. That's
Yeah. We use a
fantastic.
lot of technology. We predominantly focus on service and sales,
Mhm.
which I think is another interesting thing too, because like essentially, after we help somebody find a PO, we have another additional layer of support, which is our aftercare program, where we stay with them throughout the length of their entire relationships. So like we'll have clients, for example, that'll come to us and they'll start out with one PO. Maybe eventually they outgrow that PO or they move to another one or they move to an ASO or whatever it may be. But they've been with us the entire time. So we understand what's happening, what's going on. And it really helps them, right? It's not like, we place them somewhere and if they have an issue, I always joke around and say it's 911, not 411, right? So if you have a real issue, you call us and we'll take care of it for you, and we'll get involved. But if John needs to change his address, he's got to call the PO, right? We can't. That's not our level of expertise.
Right, right. That's interesting. Um, that's funny. One thing I'm curious about too, from the PEO standpoint, are you guys? Is it a proactive outreach on your part to try and bring new organizations in and continue to
Mm-hmm.
expand on that palette?
Yeah,
Are you trying to keep it at, the I don't know what it would be. I mean, the top 10, 20, 100 different organizations so you can provide an accurate, a la carte menu, so to speak. Like, how do you evaluate and bring on the PEOs
mm-hmm.
to ensure that your clients are getting the best service and greatest opportunities? Are they actively seeking you? Are you seeking them? Is it both? What does that all look like?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a I would say a pretty stringent set of criteria to come on with us. Like you have to be part of an APO. You have to have some sort of accreditation. A lot of the POs we work with are ESAC. You have to be IRS certified. So there's a level of before you ever get to us, right? That you've got to kind of meet. Um, you know, to be open with you, most of the POs that we work with have been on our platform. I mean, we've been in business, it's our 15th year. So most of the POs that we work with have been on our platform for 15 plus years, unless I think the newest PO on our platform has probably been around maybe 3, 4 years, but they're heavily capitalized. They meet all the requirements. Um, That's a great question because when you think about it, there's roughly 400 and something POs, right? Um, if I'll do all 400 make sense, probably not. So we try to work with the upper echelon. It changes. Obviously, certain players come and go as companies merge and so forth. But I think we have a really good product mix, right? I think it's almost at the stage where it's like you don't want to have too many, you don't want to have too few, because I feel like a lot of times, if you're showing, if you have, if when there's a lot of something, a lot of times there's a lot of the same thing. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
I think that's
Are
a
there,
that's a challenge.
yeah, that's really wise. I mean, like too many choices can be uh, more of a inhibitor than a something that escalates growth. Um,
Sure.
are there POs that have certain areas of specialization? Like, are there ones that
Yeah.
are going to be more focused on particular business niches or B2B, B2C, product-based, service-based? What does that look like as people are starting to explore? Like, give me a highlight of what it looks like when somebody comes onto your platform, because you
Sure.
mentioned it's kind of like the kayak or Expedia where you get the comparisons, but you also, one thing I don't think Expedia does, at least to my knowledge, is you take that higher level of service and
Yeah.
you're doing a thorough intake and then you're helping to position them. So what does that like front to end user experience look like
Sure.
from a high level?
Yeah, so essentially we start out with a call, right, to understand what you're doing and where you are, and then we have an online RFP intake. It takes about 10-15 minutes. And one thing I'll touch on, right, is that when you go to the POs directly to quote, they each have their own set of paperwork, right? So to give you an example, on average, it's about 5 pieces of paperwork. So if you go to 5 POs, that's 25 pieces of paperwork. It's also 5 different sales calls, 5 different pitches, 5 different, proposal meetings. Whereas with us, we do one call, right, to really understand what's going on, a discovery call, I call it. And then you complete the RFP. We go to market on your behalf. And then we put together a comprehensive proposal, right? So we compare your health insurance plans, we compare what you're doing for your workers' compensation, your current rates versus what the PO is offering. We do it for your dental, your vision, all of your ancillary lines. We do it for your administration fees, all of it, your state unemployment, your FICA, FUTA, SUTA, all of it. And then we'll tell you like this is what happens. So a lot of times people will come to us that are using a PEO, right? To give you an example, and they'll say, here's what we're currently doing. Do you think this is our best offer, right? And again, right, the only way you ever really know if you have the best is to compare. I can look at it, you can look at it. I mean, we could say maybe there's better, maybe there isn't. The only way to really know is to compare. And then so you complete one form, so you do a quick call, you do a form with us. We have certain documents that we need. We tell exactly what we need, how to find it, where to go. We'll even get on the computer and show you where to go to get it, right? And then we come back in a couple of days and we literally have I always call them bottom line driven, in-depth, side-by-side comparison of every line item. And then, from there, because those are the most competitive quotes, you'll usually demo maybe one, two, all three of them. So when I say demo, they'll look at the technology, they'll see how everything works. They meet the team that they would likely be working with if they went to that PO. They ask questions. We were obviously on those demos because we want to make sure that everything's asked. So, like for example, if you came to us and said, time clocks are a real burden for me, on those demos, we're going to ensure that they walk through how the time clocks would work and address your questions and concerns because you may potentially join them.
Mhm.
And then once that's done, after the demos are done, we'll usually get feedback from you. You'll tell us what you think, what you like, what you don't like. And then we do a final round of negotiations with the PO. And then we present it to you and from there we help you onboard to the PO. So it's it's not a it's not a long process, it's not a hard process, but it's a process, right? It's as easy as we can make it without any involvement.
That's actually amazing again too, because I know that one of the greatest challenges, and I think I'd be hard pressed to find a business owner particularly a small business owner that doesn't agree with this, is time. It's
Yeah.
the ability to build your business, hire new employees, run all of the software, the financial analytics, keep your marketing and sales in alignment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that a small business owner is doing, particularly if they haven't made that transition from operator to owner, which is a
Yeah,
whole separate conversation, right?
that's
And
true.
what's so cool that what I'm hearing about what you guys are doing is like you literally do all of the legwork. I
Yeah,
mean,
we do
there's
everything.
no, yeah, because otherwise, I mean, to your point, it's kind of like roulette. It's a little bit of a crapshoot, right? You're throwing the dice at the end of
Right.
the board and seeing what hits. Whereas you're saying, let's identify your needs. We'll create a thorough performer. We'll put it out to all these different PEOs. Then we'll put the proposals in the, most appropriate subsequent order to meet your needs
Mhm.
overall, and you guys make the decision. So it's like identify needs. The owner steps back. You guys do all of the legwork, present them
Right.
from the information, and they make the decision, which
Mhm.
again just makes that process so much easier. And I love this because I want to highlight this in particular. This has been a theme the last 2 days, it seems like. One of the most important things we can do as business owners is think about how can we make the customer experience that much
Mhm.
easier. Like,
Yeah.
how can we eliminate the obstacles, the stop signs, the speed bumps, the things that slow it down and will take more time away from what that person really wants and needs to be focusing on. So it's
Yeah.
really cool how you've done that. I got to give
Thank
you a
you.
huge applause there too.
Thank you.
Um, on that note, actually, one thing I'm curious about is, and I'm curious to see if this resonates, if you run into this, if you don't see it, maybe it's something that's not voiced. But I would have to imagine with the millions of small businesses that we have across the United States, and knowing that a lot of people get into business without necessarily having much of a business background. They don't
Mhm.
necessarily know what questions to ask. They also don't even necessarily know, and this is maybe it's too presumptive of my part, but maybe not. They also don't know what things they need, like, or should be
Right.
looking at and considering bringing on as additional services for their businesses, for their employees, or that, may not be in compliance altogether because they're just kind of neglecting it.
Right.
And it makes me wonder if there is a small percentage or a large percentage or maybe an undefined amount that are almost afraid or embarrassed to come to you because they know they don't know what they don't know, but they don't even know what to ask, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
what would you say to that person if they're going, holy shit, I'm listening to this conversation. I would love to reach out, but I don't want to admit that I have fallen short in these areas. And I would say first person, like, look, we've all been there. Just pick up the phone, make the call, hop on the website, fill out the application. But what would you say to those people to maybe help put their
Sure.
mind at ease and help illustrate some of the additional value outside what you said already?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. This is what I would say to him. I would say I've been there. I've had these same problems. The other thing I would say too, right, that I think touches to the point of what you're talking about is I always say there's two sides to business, right? And I know you'll agree with me on this. There's the business of the business, and then there's whatever it is you do, right? So it's like, when I first started Dinsmore Steele, right, I didn't have any employees. I was me. And then when you have employees, like I don't know what I mean, and I own a PEO brokerage. I have no idea what forms have to be filled out when you hire somebody, right? I don't know, and I don't know of any college, and maybe there is, right? I don't know, but I don't know of any college class that tells you that either. I don't even know if it would be relevant. You know what I mean? I graduated from college in 2000, so I mean, what is this, 2024? So I'm sure the forms have changed.
Yeah.
But my point is that I think the most important skill in business isn't dealing with HR task. It's moving the needle, right? For example, with me, right? I know we're not talking about this, but just give an example. One of the best things I ever did was outsource a lot of functions of my business. For example, like I have a degree in finance, and that's great, right? I don't know how to do my taxes. No one would hire me to do their taxes. So instead, I get an accountant, right? Um, I don't want to bother with doing my books, so I have someone do it, right? I think what a lot of people misunderstand, and I don't know, you didn't ask this, but I just kind of always think it. And I always like to say it, is that you have to determine a dollar amount of what you are making an hour when you own a business, whatever it is, right? It could be $100, $1,000, a million. I mean, it really depends. But figure out whatever that dollar amount is, and if you can outsource, so let's say your amount's $100, and you can get someone to do the books for 80, outsource it,
Mhm.
right? Give them the 80 and let them do it, right? And I think that's a real challenge of playing back into this is that, you know, everybody who looks at people in the business are very smart. They are, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're smart at PO, right? I'm good at it because I do it every day, but like I don't, there's a lot of things I don't know how to do. If I don't know how to do it, I just hire someone to do it or I outsource it, right? And I think a lot of times, I'll just say this, I think people worry, and I get it, right? I've been there, that they're wasting money on outsourcing these things when they could do them themselves. And what I would challenge them with is this: is that unless if you're doing something, even at my level, right? I'm not saying on some big level, right? But I have employees, I have a team, right? I've obviously been doing this a while. I only focus on things that move the needle. Only. right? I don't like, again, right? If I find I don't work on spreadsheets, I do from time to time, but it's things I want to work on. If I'm working on something and it's not going to help us grow the company, then I don't waste my time. I outsource it, get rid of it, delegate it, delete it. Goodbye.
I struggled with that for a long time. And I mean, I know because it
Mm-hmm.
was that internal battle of thinking, oh, well, I know how to do this. I can do it faster. It's going to take me a long time to train somebody to do it. What if they make the mistakes? And then, I love what you said about breaking it down to, an actual simplistic formula. It's like if
Mm-hmm.
I'm earning $100 an hour in my company and I can find somebody and pay them $80 an hour to perform this particular function, now that allows me to go focus on the gross aspects of things, the things that actually move the needle, where that 100 can move up to 150.
That's
Whereas
right.
we create our own restraints, our own bottleneck, if we continue to take on all of those little ancillary things that we shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
doing. And that's a little bit of
Right.
what I alluded to earlier. It's like that difference between the operator and the owner. And the thing
Mm-hmm.
that the owner has figured out how to do is put the right people in the right positions to take those tasks off their plate until ultimately they're now serving as board of advisors and watching the team from a high level, not really involved in the day-to-day operations. There's one other
Yeah.
thing you said here that was really important. You said this earlier, and it slightly different context, but it correlates here too. The way I would say it is start with the end in mind. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, here's the amount I want to earn. Here's the number of hours I'm going to have to work. Here's the amount I'm going to have to make each hour. And you had a similar process with that when you're talking about the business and how we have somebody take over these tasks. So another really great tip and insight. I wanted to highlight that because I think that's so profound, so simple, but also so very, very important. Um, I had a question around the small business owner again, because I think this is just such a great tangent and an appropriate topic. Like where you talked about hiring other people to take on those things. And
Mm-hmm.
I've found this, and I'm sure you'd probably agree to, at least to a degree, to be a very double-edged sword. What I mean by that, and I think you said it without saying it, is if I hired multiple people to build marketing programs and sales teams and ops infrastructures and all this kind of stuff. And 9 times out of 10 in the beginning, I ended up just pissing a lot of money down the drain. And for
Yeah. Oh
me,
yeah.
I think the number one reason why is if I did not have a fundamental understanding of the thing that I was hiring the person to do, I had no means to hold them accountable to doing that
Mm-hmm.
thing well. It was very easy for somebody to give a great pitch and pull the wool over your eyes, but not necessarily deliver. What does that balance look like to you? Because it's like, it's not that you necessarily need to be an effective bookkeeper. You have a financial background, so I
Right.
mean that helps. But like, it's not that you have to know that, but you still need to understand what you're looking at. Like,
Yeah.
how do you evaluate those hires and maybe, determine what is going to be the first best and most appropriate thing to bring on?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So there's a guy named Dan Martell. I read a book he
Yeah,
has. I think it's called Buy Back Your Time. He's great.
yeah.
I call a couple of his principles. I follow his email inbox rules, whatever, to a T. But um, I would say that immediately, like right off the bat, the first hire I would make is someone to take off the administrative task. Like if I had to, like if someone said to me like, "What do you do?" Like get a VA, get a helper immediately to answer emails is okay. Because if you're in email, unless you get paid to answer emails, then don't be in your emails. Um, the second thing I would say is that I'm sorry. What was the other question? I know you asked me a couple questions, but I was thinking about.
No, I think you're pretty well tying into it. It was more about how do you decide who to bring on
Oh
first,
yeah,
and then like what are those challenges with potentially hiring the wrong people? How do you maintain that balance of understanding the skill set that you're hiring somebody for without
sure.
necessarily having to be an expert at the same time so that they can't take advantage of you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to do that when it comes to the marketing people. I find
Yeah.
that I always get sold a bill of goods. No, I'm joking. I partially. I find I find that it's always best to keep certain things in house or at least hire for in house, right? Um, and then certain things I think it's okay to outsource to anybody. That's what I mean. But I think like a lot of times, right? Certain things you need to like try to hire and keep the people internal, right? So it's more of a continuity. Um, I think one way to really drill down into what needs to be done and to what moves the needle is I follow Dan Martell's 10-80-10. So I'll lay out what the first 10% of what I want done. hire someone to do the other 80, and then I'll come in the last 10 and make notes. One thing I will say though, that I've found pretty much along the lines is that everybody wastes a bunch of money in the beginning trying to figure out who to hire. I mean, it's been a nightmare trying to figure out who to hire. I mean, I had to hire one time, right? I know you didn't ask me, but I'll say I had to hire one time who literally was great. And nothing against people in the Philippines. I love the Philippines. We had a guy, and I have some people now in the Philippines. They're wonderful. But I had a lady in the Philippines, and she was wonderful. And she literally disappeared for 2 weeks. And when she came back, she said that she had caught diabetes and had been cured of it and was ready back to work. And I said, well, that's amazing, but we moved on with someone else. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
that's it. The other thing I would say too, right, that really has benefited me, and it took me a long time to learn this, is when you know how to do something. So, like for example, if you in the beginning, if you're building a list or whatever it is you're doing, right, you're checking your email, record it, right. So that, and make it an SOP, whatever. Right, there's a bunch of tools out there. You'll figure out which tools to use, but I find that having a library of how to do things is pretty good, because then they can go back and watch it. The other thing I would say too, right, and I'll hush up about this, is that if you really don't want to waste money on people, don't try to get people for $2 or $3 an hour.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember this guy one time. He's like, I got somebody for $3 an hour, and they vanished. I mean, like, of course they are. Like, no, you have to hire. The other thing I would say is that once you get to a certain level, you only do business with people that you will deal with long term.
100%. Yeah. It's the scarcity mentality in the beginning. You feel like you need to work with everybody, and then through time you learn that not everybody is a good client. There's always the small minority that take up the majority of your time and emotional bandwidth and resources too. So those are phenomenal tips and insights.
It's the 80-20, right?
Oh, it is 100%. Last question for you before we wrap up here is I'm curious, what's next? Any big projects, like what's the next evolution with Dinsmore Steele? Like what are you guys working on?
So we're working on a lot of stuff. We're trying to make it easier. There's not, I say one of the biggest challenges that we have is I find it challenging, right? Is what I should say. I find it challenging to market what I do, because most people don't, they don't think about it. They don't care about it, whatever. Right. I have a buddy of mine, right? He works for an energy drink company, and he's always like, it's pretty easy. I mean, of course it is, right? You're selling energy drinks. I would say what's next for us is just get bigger, just keep growing. I think that not a lot of people know what a PO is. So I think when not a lot of people know what a PO is, it's kind of difficult to, even my mom, right? And I love her to death. My mom's like, he sells insurance, and I have an insurance license. We're all licensed because there's insurance involved. But, if you called me up about your life insurance policy, good luck. I have no idea. I don't know. I know people that can help you, but I have no idea what you should do.
So expansion's on the horizon, how you can make even more impact. And that cracks me up too. My fiance, we've been together for 10 years, and she's still, if somebody asks her what I do, she's like, I don't know.
You know what she probably says? She probably says he's a connector, right? I used to get that a lot. He connects people together, and I'm like, well, I do have a title, right? I have an organization.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Technically, she's like, people pay you what to do what? I'm like, yeah, we won't get into that.
I solve problems.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Well, really, truly, I tell her that fundamentally. I'm like, just tell them I help businesses grow and do better. Like, make it simple. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for spending your time with us on the Perpetual Growth Podcast, and a big shout out to Rodney Steele for bringing so much value to today's conversation. Rodney, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about what you're working on? Where can they find you on the web, fill out one of these applications, and start getting some more exposure to all the cool stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I just look up Rodney Steele, and then for our company, it's dinsmoresteele.com. Stop by, book a call. We have a calculator on there that'll tell you, depending upon whatever it is you're doing, just click on whatever it is you're doing. It'll give you an estimate of what you could save. Pretty cool. Awesome. It took like 2 years to build that thing.
It's amazing how the things that we think are going to be simple end up turning into way more complex ventures than we imagined. But so that's awesome. You guys can find Rodney on LinkedIn. That's Rodney Steele. And then, of course, Dinsmore Steele. payroll.com, and we'll make sure that we put all those links in the notes so it's easy to find. Now, if this episode sparks something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and leave a review to help us reach even more people on their growth journey. And remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. We'll see you guys next time.